Hello, Max. Another Osmium update after the holiday season. It's been quite a while. We've both been on holidays within the European Union, and that's probably a good thing to start about as well because European Union, US, um, China, the rest of the world, it's kind of like everything is going mental or something. I don't know, but there's a lot going on. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is data sovereignty. So, without further ado, kick it off.
Absolutely. Great to be back, Ariane, and see that we look both well rested apparently, so that's a good thing. Yeah, so obviously, uh, data sovereignty has always been kind of a interesting topic, to discuss about. I mean, before there was a new presidential election in the US, it was primarily, let's say, a regulatory topic within the European Union about where you need to place your data in light with data sovereignty laws. I'm talking about personally identifiable data, sensitive data, and so on. So we're getting to our favorite land of data management, but clearly this was always more or less in a context which was more putting the data of the customers and the sensitivity of data um, more in the primary light spot somehow. Now we are in a situation where the kind of privileged relationship that the European Union, or rather the European continent, has had primarily with the United States for the past 80 years, has been kind of dramatically shifting. Um, I'm not saying it's a new trend, and we're not here to do politics, but it always has been kind of a co-opetition space where we are in friendly, relationships and so on, but our industries are competing. We've seen that with cars. We see that from time to time with some presidents coming in the US and putting taxes on French wines, on German cars, on whatever, is the fad of the day, or in the aerospace industry. But now, in if we look at things in 2025, we are now in a fully digitized world where data is omnipresent, digital services are reigning supreme, and we are in a state of dependency now because we've been kind of over the past 20, 30, 40 plus years, we've kind of been very complacent in Europe, and we've kind of let innovation slip through our hands. And if you look at what's happening in the semiconductor space, most of the production is located in Southeast Asia, even though, and we can get to the point of Intel later, some of the patents, I mean, the industry innovation is somehow driven somehow from the US, but the execution implementation is happening in Asia. And we're in the middle of that, and we don't have any kind of leverage over that. So maybe I'm handing, it was just kind of a setting context, handing it over to you, maybe, Ariane, if you see something special there, because I can talk, for a long while.
Yeah, yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. So, there's a couple of things. I think if you look at data sovereignty and what is going on there, I think we need to step back and not go into the conversation of okay, what's going on in things like ASML, Intel, AMD, Nvidia, because you know I think that's a completely different discussion. If I'm looking for myself, yesterday I had a discussion with a guy I know and respect. He's not in IT, and he was talking about what was going on in the space of IT, and we were kind of like talking about everything going on with the US, going on with one of the things that he mentioned, and what I wanted to go into is what happened at the International Strafhof here in The Hague, where one of the guys um, was kind of talking about getting Trump to the Netherlands at the International Strafhof and doing um, something with him that he didn't like. And in the end, what happened is that Microsoft was summoned by the Trump administration, making sure that the guy couldn't um, uh, go into his Microsoft 365 account anymore. I think that's a much more important topic to talk about because that is what's happening. People are seeing that, and companies are seeing that as well. And if you look at data sovereignty, I think a lot of one of the things that I told him is this is what I've been talking about for 15, 20 years already. We are putting all of our data into a basket in which we are, once shit hits the fan, it really hits the fan because we are not able to get to our data anymore. And with all the geopolitical things that's going on in the world at the moment, I think it's getting more and more important to make sure that you know where your data is, that your data is in, because we were also talking about, only go back 80 years
Mhm,
and you can say, yeah, if it's in the European Union, I'm okay. But go
mhm.
back 80 years and it was not okay. That's then what you
Yes,
go. I
absolutely.
think that's a
Mhm,
much broader discussion for now. We can talk about ASML, Intel, and all of that another time.
also and also let's not go back into archival solutions and the amazing discussions we had, about what's going to happen in 10,000 years if Norway becomes a fascist state. But it's fine, we can skip it.
Cool, cool, cool. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's really where, and we've
Mhm,
been in this discussion multiple times over multiple iterations, and the thing is, we don't really have a solution yet, and I'm not sure if it will ever happen. Like what all the big hyperscalers are offering to you and me, but also to the large enterprises in Europe and the rest of the world. So
mhm,
um, the laws need to be accompanied with that. But in the end, if someone from the international Strakov can just
mhm,
be put off with a click of a button,
mhm,
um,
mhm,
we can do whatever we want. But where is our data? And that's where data sovereignty really comes in. But there needs to happen a lot of things on all levels, from you and me until the EU regulation people.
mhm.
But it will take years to make it happen in a way that we are not going to uh, be all dependent on um, U.S. government, whatever it is, in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. But there needs to be something, and that's for me. That's the data sovereignty that I'm looking at. There's much more
Mhm.
to say, but back to you for this one.
Yeah, of course, and as always, and that's maybe one of the challenges I have, and I see that also when I'm working with clients, is I always need to take like 5 steps back, to get back to the point. And the point is that, to have full sovereignty over your data, if you want to speak about full sovereignty, then you need to have full sovereignty over the entire stack. And it goes all the way down to industrial, independence, building the technology on top of that. So you need to have, in a way, and I know it's impossible in today's world, right? The materials, the semiconductors, the architecture, the different components, so you can build that part, and then you can start building the elements on top of that. But you're really right on the point that it's going to take decades if we even get there, right? So at the moment, if we take the top down from the data all the way down to things, is, in a sense, we have a data management problem, which is, I have a lot of data which has different levels of sensitivity, different levels of criticality, which, uh, as an organization, I may decide I don't care at all about that, right? I can be a very conscious CIO or CDO, Chief Data Officer or Chief Information Officer or CTO, whatever, and I can say, it's an important topic for me. I'm going to do my best to bring that in line with what we need to do as an organization. Or you can say, we have other problems to deal with. We need to be profitable. We need to earn money. We're here to return, to provide the value to shareholders, and we don't care about that. We'll just do the minimum. But the minimum is here in the EU region, right? Because you have some data sovereignty laws in different countries. You have to classify GDPR data and so on. And therefore, you need to look at where the data is placed. And it is becoming more and more important nowadays when a country which is, let's say, a long-time business partner and a friendly country suddenly starts to have a much more, let's say, aggressive and inquisitive approach to things, right? And the other point is that it is not a new thing, right? The Cloud Act, I forgot the acronym for that, but you will see that soon because we're working on some interesting pieces of work that will touch on data protection and data sovereignty in different aspects. Um, this act mandates that any US-based company which holds data has to satisfy any request from law enforcement agencies in the US, regardless of where the data is located. So if you have a data which is on a cloud provider, which is operated by US company, then nothing really kind of prevents that. Again, we are not lawyers, so you have to, as an organization, you have to look into the contracts and the, let's say, subtleties and involve your legal team in what you need to do there. But think twice before you place data somewhere in the cloud. And even I would say, and I'll get back to you, and this is going to be maybe a longer one. So we have to account that maybe it's going to not be just 10, 12 minutes or 15, it may go more. But you have different levels of sovereignty. And I think that our friend Enrico Signoretti, which has been doing a lot of groundwork on educating people here in the region, has some good points about that, right? What are we talking about when we talk about, so we know that we need to govern data, but now we need to define where we place the data. The highest level of sovereignty you can have is, of course, that you have your data on-prem in your data center in a given region, right? You are in scope of the German Datenschutzgrundgesetz, or whatever it's called. Sorry for my German. The law which dictates, data sovereignty. If you have your data on-prem in your data center in Germany and you're a German company and you make sure the data never moves away, means that you back it up into another location in Germany, you're perfectly safe. But now if imagine you decide to put it in the cloud, am I and now am I putting this data on a Azure or AWS region in the in Germany? Is it safe enough? What is the implication? Should I use a global hyperscaler or should I consider a tier two or a tier three regional provider? What is the benefit that I get? Are they good? Because then you get into the topic of, oh, is easy to orchestrate all of that, right? You can fulfill all of the requirements from a regulatory perspective, but then technically it can be hard to integrate because they don't have all of the agility and so on. So, what's your take on that, Ariane? Before I get lost into usual and chaos.
Yeah. It's a really hard discussion, and a lot of companies are struggling with it. A lot of companies are not even thinking about it. So there's and everything in between. So it's a discussion that will go on for multiple years, as we already said. It's something that will take a lot of time, and it needs a lot of discussion. And if you look at where the data resides, but even if you take a step back from that one, if you look at how companies are looking at their data, and we already mentioned data management, data compliancy, all that kind of stuff, knowing where your data is, what your data is, what is important, where it needs to be. Um, that's one of the aspects. But also with everything that went on the last 10 years or so with the cloud burst, um, I think a lot of companies just don't realize where all the data resides and what the regulations are on that. So getting your data in order will be one of the things that is most important for the next couple of years. Knowing what it is, knowing where it is, knowing where it should be. I think most companies should focus on that.
Mhm.
Making sure that your protection, and you already mentioned we are working on something for that, um, resides somewhere where you can touch it, even if someone like Trump, Putin, or whatever big leader of a world organization thinks switching to, okay, I don't like you anymore, your data is ours. um, if you've got at least a good protection, you can still leverage the data because you've got it somewhere else where you can
Mhm.
take it and leverage it from another perspective. So
Mhm.
that's one of the things. But like you already mentioned, there's so much going on in the land of data. I think I had a discussion with one of the leaders of Rubrik when they just started, and we were just talking, and one of the things I mentioned to him, whoever holds the data is king. And that was, what was it, more than 10 years ago.
Mhm.
It still holds, it, and it gets even worse and worse, or better and better, whatever you want to call it. But data is so important that I think a lot of companies need to look at, okay, so what is my data? Where is it? And what should I do to make sure that if something happens, I can still get to it? That are the most important aspects. And sovereignty is one of the things that you can take care of by making at least sure that you have a data protection that will make sure that if something happens, you can still go to your data and somehow leverage the data that you need. Like you said, we can talk about this for hours, I would
Mhm.
say. Sovereignty, I really urge, you already mentioned his name. I think one of the others is probably our friend Chris Evans, who
Mhm.
writes about those things as well. But Enrico and Chris do a lot on LinkedIn about
Yeah.
these topics. And it's always amazing to read about those. And um, yeah, like I mentioned, I think there's so much going on in the world at the moment that
Mhm.
data, be it data protection, data management, data sovereignty, um, we've got a lot of stuff that we can write about, talk about,
Mm.
think about, and uh, let's hope some of the people will respond to putting this on LinkedIn, putting this on the channels that we have at the moment. And I'm really
Mhm.
interested in hearing what other people think about this. Also from a US perspective, or from a China perspective, or from an Asia perspective,
Mhm.
because we are talking about it from a European perspective, but um, that's
Absolutely.
only part of it, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I'm going to try to kind of wrap up, not taking too much time. But as you say, we look at things from an EMEA-centric perspective, but we have friends in Asia, and we see that the challenges there are kind of similar in a way, right? I mean, the laws that we have for data sovereignty, the laws that we have for data privacy are being implemented by countries of any kind and any political regime. So it is clearly a challenge for countries of all parts of the world and all sizes. The thing which I want to wrap up on, and by the way, good call on also mentioning Chris Evans, because Chris has as well so very interesting takes on the more kind of hardware side of things, about what's happening with the vendors, with Intel, with ARM, and so on. Really interesting takes there. What I would say is that you have to go through several phases, right? You need, as you mentioned clearly, you need to do an assessment of what is your exposure, what is your risk, what do you have in place, and whether you even have some policies. Data management, as you say, understanding data. We understand data was the key to the data. The data, sorry, is king. And then we can wrap up looking at kind of three directions or three recommendations. One is, of course, for governments to not overlook the risk or underplay the risk, because the risk is real. And some countries have implemented their own governmental clouds and so on. So clearly this is important. I can say that, being a French citizen, France always wanted to kind of maintain a kind of strategic autonomy within every organization it's part of, but not just France, others are doing that as well. I think they understand the risks, not just because of the US, but because of other actors, but clearly making sure that they have their own regulations, that they are able, within, of course, the framework of the European Union, but not to stall things, waiting for someone to take a decision by 27 or 29 or however how much we are at the moment. The recommendation for organizations clearly is, to do these assessments, to be very clear and intentional about what you do with the data, to stop looking at things from a kind of a transnational aspect where, whatever happens, just the money needs to flow and that's the only thing that counts. Understand that there is a systemic risk here at play, that you need to understand where your critical assets are and what is your important data. And thirdly, a recommendation also for EMEA-based industry players, because again, there is an opportunity here for cooperation. I'm not saying for consolidation, perhaps. I mean, we never really had that thing which is in the US, that you can grow to these, huge mastodons, huge companies. But we have some companies like, I think, I'm not sure if, for example, OVH, right? OVH Cloud could be an interesting take. The thing I'm hearing from most people and in the industry, people like Enrico and others, is that the level of integration, the interfaces, the way this is managed is far beyond behind what you get with Azure or GCP and so on. But also even for regional, cloud operators, think about, cross-country collaborations, see, and for investors, potential for expansion within the EU or fusions or whatever. It's important for us to build our own, let's say, indigenous, somehow local, EMEA-based cloud alternatives. And I'll close with that.
Awesome. Thank you for a great discussion again. We can probably do another one and go a little bit deeper. Thank you for watching, and chime in if you want to tell us something about what you see in EMEA or anywhere else in the world, and let us know, because we're eager to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Thanks.